This video is sponsored by Thyme.
Hey, what's up? Today, I'm gonna show you guys how to make a very good tasting pot roast. It hits just as hard as the other famous beef braises like beef stew or beef bourguignon, but it's less work and actually delivers the exact same experience.
That is better than beef bourguignon.
No.
Yeah, dude.
No, he said it.
To get started, I'll need 3 to 5 pounds of beef chuck roast. Chuck is really the only option here because it's the only roast on the cow that is both large format and has the 70-30 lean to fat ratio that we're looking for throughout the entire muscle. To prep it for the pot, I'll need to generously season the top, the bottom, and all around on the sides. This is a 3.5 pound roast with not a lot of surface area to carry the seasoning, so it does need a lot of salt. I would say at least a full tablespoon or about 20 grams per side. And once this beef is liberally salted up, I'll set it aside and let the salt penetrate for at least 20 minutes. Next, let's prep the veggies. For this classic pot roast, I go for a mirepoix of shallots, carrots, celery, and a little bit of garlic. First up, I'll rough chop about 225 grams of peeled shallots. Or of course, onions would also work. Just cut those into 1 to 2 inch pieces like the shallots. I'm sure most people will go for onions and that's totally fine. I like shallots because they make the final sauce just a little bit less sweet. Next, I'll take 4 to 6 stalks of celery and cut those down into Lego brick sized pieces. In total, I'll need 225 grams. Next, I'll grab 3 chunky carrots and cut those into obliques. What is an oblique? Well, it's a knife cut that's mainly used in classic French restaurants. It's an easier alternative to dicing, in my opinion, because there's no waste and you don't need to stress about angular perfection. The technique is very simple too. You make your first cut a diagonal cut, then turn the veggie 45 to 90 degrees, and then just cut through your last cut on an angle. It's very simple, and this style of cutting can be applied to pretty much any root vegetable or even zucchini and eggplant. Lastly, I'll just crush 4 to 5 garlics through my garlic press, and in total I need 15 to 20 grams. Next, I'll grab a heavy bottom pot, drop it on the stove over medium-high heat, and then preheat my oven to 275F. Now, let's check back on that beef. At this point, the beef is seasoned up, but very wet. So to ensure a crusty brown sear, I'll take a paper towel and then thoroughly dry off both sides. Do not half-ass this part, please. The level of surface moisture will directly impact the quality of your sear, so please, please, please make it dry. Next, into my hot Dutch oven, I'll drizzle a long squeezer of high smoke point oil, then I'll drop in my salted roast. Make sure to press the meat into the pot to ensure even contact. If you don't press, steam's gonna bubble up underneath and it'll prevent a good sear from happening. Now, I'll give this beef at least 5 to 6 minutes of undisturbed searing. A little rotation is also a good move here, by the way. That's going to get some new meat touching the pan and really up the quality of the sear. And after 6 to 7 minutes of browning this thing, you can see this sear looks so sick. That's thanks to a dry beef, you guys. Now I'll flip this over and sear it on the other side for 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, when I check back, you can see that side deux has been deeply browned as well. So next, I'll move this whole roast over to a plate to hang out while I build the sauce. Back into the pot, I'll drop 50 grams of butter, then melt it. Then I'll add in my shallots, carrots, celery, garlic, and then a strong pinch of salt. Then I'll stir everything together to get things cooking. This step is mainly to give the veggies a little caramelization and to build just a little bit more flavor in the sauce. And once these veggies are softened slightly and smelling aromatic, I'll add in 25 grams of tomato paste and saute that for about 2 minutes. As always, I want to open up the tinny canned tomato flavor, so I'll just fry it in fat with the veggies until the paste is glazing up the bottom of the pot and it's gone from red to rusty colored like this. Now, to bring a little bit of body to this sauce, I'm going to add in 25 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm using gluten-free flour here because my #1 sweetest babe, Lauren, is gluten-free. And if you're wondering, yes, regular glutened flour thickens the exact same as this Bob stuff. And once that flour is stirred in and fried off a little bit, I'll add in 150 grams of red wine, 25 grams of worch, and then stir to deglaze. At this point, there's quite a bit of tasty brown stuff on the pot, and we want to get that into the sauce. So I'll scrape with a wooden spoon for about 30 seconds to a minute until the flour starts to thicken the wine. Then I'll come back with 15 grams of Better Than Bouillon beef base. By the way, this video is not sponsored by them. I just really like this product. And then I'll add in 750 grams of beef stock. This doesn't have a ton of flavor, but it does make the sauce more brown and it brings some faint mirepoix flavor that I like. Next, I'll bring the whole thing up to a simmer, then carefully snuggle up my seared roast into this liquid. Make sure to push any veggies off to the side, by the way. We want this beef sitting on the bottom of the pot. And next, in goes 2 bay leaves, a few sprigs of fresh thyme, and then for the best results, a probe thermometer. Knowing the internal temperature of this pot roast as it cooks can really help us achieve the optimal texture, and I'll explain more on why that is in just a second. For now, I'll load this into a 275F oven with the lid on, but very slightly ajar, and then cook for roughly 4 to 5 hours. But I'll check back once my roast hits 195F, which should be in about 2 hours. In the meantime, I'll thank Thyfer for sponsoring this video. When you're cooking big pieces of meat, like a chuck roast for a long period of time, using a meat thermometer is probably your best friend. This Thyfer sink that I've been using to measure this meat is actually the first wireless meat probe that I've used, and the tech has made it super easy to nail this meat's temperature. You can monitor the temperature in 2 places too, on the base that charges the probes or in an app on your phone. Just set the target cooking temperature and it'll show you the remaining cook time and let you know when you've hit your temperature sweet spot. And to do that, the probe actually uses 6 different built-in sensors, so it's super accurate. Plus, you get 2 probes with your Thyfer sink, so you can temp 2 pieces of meat at the same time, or you can monitor 2 different parts of one giant piece of meat. In my experience, this thermometer is accurate, thorough, and very reliable. It stays connected to the base in your phone pretty much no matter what, so there's no frustrating connection issues. So to grab a Thyfer sink for yourself or for a meat-loving bud, head to the link in my description below and use code Brian20 off to get 20% off the Thyfer sink. Again, that's code Brian20 off. Also, if you're wondering, hey Bri, can I skip the slow oven cooking here and speed this up with a pressure cooker? Well, no. I tried it and I definitely wouldn't recommend it because inside a pressure cooker, the beef's internal temperature gets up to like 250F. This higher temp environment profoundly tightens the meat fibers, making the meat shreddable but unpleasant to eat.
Oh, hot. What do you think?
Ropey.
It's like tender, but also chewy at the same time. It does not feel good on your teeth.
Works the jaw.
Now, according to food scientist Harold McGee, for tough, large cuts of meat, the key is to cook slowly at or just above the collagen dissolving minimum to minimize drying out the meat fibers. This collagen dissolving minimum that Harold mentions begins when the meat hits an internal of 180F. That is much lower than the pressure cooker's 250. Basically, the slower and more gently we dissolve the collagen into gelatin, the more succulent and tender our braised meat's gonna be. Personally, I prefer to braise my meat at an internal temperature slightly above this collagen dissolving minimum of 180 because cooking meat at that low of a temperature takes about 8 to 10 hours for it to get tender. Instead, I prefer 190 to 195 because it gives us the same unctuous shreddable result, but in about half the time. Now, after 2 hours of slowly bringing up the temperature on this roast, we've reached my ideal collagen dissolving temperature of about 190 to 195F. But as you can see, this is not tender at all. That's to be expected. From here, we need to hold this roast in this temperature sweet spot for a long time to slowly melt that collagen into gelatin. So to do that, I'll throw the pot roast back into my oven and cook it lid ajar for another 2 to 3 hours. While that finishes cooking, I want to show you guys a pretty cool way of making the ideal potato to serve under this pot roast. I actually thought of it while dressing my loaded baker at a steak restaurant last weekend. Now to make it, I'll start with 6 large russet potatoes, then peel them and wrap each potato with a single layer of aluminum foil. From here, I'll throw all 6 potatoes into the oven on a sheet tray and slow roast them alongside my pot roast for about 2 hours. And after about 4.5 hours of low temp braising, it's time to check this beef for tenderness. Right now, it's the perfect texture in my opinion. It's shreddable, but still held together, but also barely held together. You want to shred this on your plate with your fork or in your mouth, not in the pot. Importantly, before we call this done, I do need to taste the sauce for salt.
Wow. I don't think that really needs any salt. The bouillon kind of carries it. The veggies had some salt. The beef was heavily salted. Tastes great.
Before I rip into this meat, I'm gonna let it rest for about 30 minutes. And during that time, the meat's gonna actually reabsorb some of the liquid that was squeezed out of it during the cook. While that rests, I'll snatch all of my slow roasted potatoes from the oven. And as you can see, they're totally tender. 100% mashable. So I'll move all 6 into a high-sided saucepan and then add in a generous grip of salt, a whole stick of butter at least, and then a country dollop of sour cream. Next, I'll just smash things together as if I was dressing a baked potato at a steak restaurant. I can't believe I didn't think of this sooner. You guys, loaded baked potatoes are probably the second best way to eat potatoes behind French fries. The texture is chunky, but soft and very, very creamy. Side note, I realized that Adam Ragusa also served his pot roast with roasted mashed potatoes, and I'm pretty sure I didn't get this idea from his video. I think it was a true steakhouse epiphany for me. If you want to see how Adam does it, I'll link to his video down below, and I'm sure that whole process and recipe is excellent, so make sure to check that out. And after 30 minutes of rest time on this beef, I'll come back and carefully extract a chunk of shreddy meat. A lot of recipes want you to slice the pot roast and then sauce it up on a plate, and that's stupid to me. I think it's just way better to rip a chunk off and drop it on top of your potatoes. Next, a few spoonfuls of tender, juicy beef flavored veggies, then a little bit of sauce to glaze it all up. You guys, this dish is way easier than beef bourguignon, and I'll say it, I think at this moment in my life, it hits just as hard, maybe harder. The beef is succulent, tender, juicy, and perfectly seasoned. The sauce is beefy, round, and just a touch sweet from the carrots. If you're one of those weirdos that likes feeling happy, then you should make this. It's gonna work. Now, if you wanna see another recipe for an easy one-pot meal that's super comforting, then check out this video for one-pot spaghetti and meat sauce. You're gonna love it. I'll see you over there.